conductor ampacity calculations according to 310.15 consider the conductor's insulation temperature rating, usually 90 degrees Celsius. However, this is under the condition that the adjusted or corrected ampacity doesn't exceed that of a 60 degrees Celsius rated conductor. When more than two non-metallic sheath cables, often called NM cables, each containing two or more current-carrying conductors, are bundled together and pass through wood framing that is to be fire or draft stopped using thermal insulation or sealing foam, the allowable ampacity of each conductor must be adjusted. This adjustment is outlined in Table 310.15 B2 of the National Electrical Code, or NEC. This requirement primarily focuses on wood framing members. It doesn't come into play unless you have more than 9 current-carrying conductors bundled together. Let's consider an example using a 15 amp circuit. Imagine we bundle 3 14/2 cables and one 14/3 cable. This configuration gives us a total of 9 current-carrying 14 American wire gauge, or AUG, THHN conductors. According to Table 310.16, the ampacity for each of these 14 AWG conductors is 25 amps and 90 degrees Celsius. However, due to the bundling, we must apply an adjustment factor from Table 310.15 B2. In this case, the adjustment factor is 70%. To calculate the adjusted conductor ampacity, we multiply the initial ampacity by the adjustment factor. That's 25 amps times 0.70, which equals 17.5 amps. So, the adjusted ampacity for each conductor in this scenario is 17.5 amps. Now, the important thing to understand is this concept of not exceeding the 60 degrees Celsius rating. The correct understanding is that when you have more than 9 current-carrying conductors bundled together, the ampacity is adjusted downwards. This derating reduces the current-carrying capacity of each individual conductor. This reduction in ampacity ensures that it will not exceed the ampacity of a 60 degrees Celsius rated conductor under similar conditions. To better understand the ampacity adjustments for bundled cables, let's delve into the details of the National Electrical Code, specifically Section 310.15 and Table 310.15. B2. These resources provide the guidelines for determining the appropriate ampacity derating factors based on the number of current-carrying conductors in a bundle. The NEC defines a current-carrying conductor as a conductor that carries current under normal conditions. This typically includes the ungrounded, or hot, conductors and the neutral conductor in certain situations. Grounding conductors are not considered current-carrying conductors for ampacity adjustment purposes. When multiple current-carrying conductors are bundled together, they generate heat. The more conductors in a bundle, the more heat is generated. This heat can raise the temperature of the conductors and their insulation, potentially leading to insulation breakdown and even fire hazards. To prevent these risks, the NEC requires ampacity adjustment factors to be applied to the conductor's allowable ampacity. Table 310.15 B2 provides these adjustment factors based on the number of current-carrying conductors in a raceway or cable. The table lists the number of conductors and the corresponding adjustment factor expressed as a percentage. For example, if you have 4 to 6 current-carrying conductors in a raceway or cable, the adjustment factor is 80%. This means that the allowable ampacity of each conductor must be reduced to 80% of its original value. Similarly, for 7 to 9 conductors, the adjustment factor is 70%, and for 10 to 20 conductors is 50%. The ampacity adjustment factors in Table 310.15 B2 are cumulative. This means that if you have multiple ampacity adjustment factors that apply to a conductor, you must multiply all of them together to determine the final adjusted ampacity. For example, if you have a conductor that is subject to both an ampacity adjustment factor for the number of conductors in a raceway and an ampacity adjustment factor for ambient temperature, you must multiply both adjustment factors together to determine the final adjusted ampacity. In addition to the ampacity adjustment factors in Table 310.15 B2, A. The NEC also requires ampacity correction factors to be applied to conductors based on the ambient temperature. The ambient temperature is the temperature of the air or earth surrounding the conductor. The ampacity correction factors are found in the ampacity tables, such as Table 310.16, and are based on the conductor's insulation temperature rating. If the ambient temperature is higher than the temperature rating of the conductor's insulation, the conductor's ampacity must be reduced. The ampacity correction factors are expressed as percentages or multipliers. For example, if a conductor has an insulation temperature rating of 90 degrees Celsius and the ambient temperature is 40 degrees Celsius, the ampacity correction factor is 1.0. This means that the conductor's ampacity does not need to be adjusted. However, if the ambient temperature is 50 degrees Celsius, the ampacity correction factor is 0.91. This means that the conductor's ampacity must be reduced to 91% of its original value. To illustrate the application of ampacity adjustment and correction factors, let's consider an example. Suppose we have a 12 AWG-THHN conductor installed in a raceway with 5 other current-carrying conductors. The ambient temperature is 40 degrees Celsius. According to Table 310.16, the allowable ampacity of a 12 AWG-THHN conductor is 30 amps at 90 degrees Celsius. However, we must apply an ampacity adjustment factor for the number of conductors in the raceway. According to Table 310.15, B2. A. The adjustment factor for 4 to 6 conductors is 80%. Therefore, the adjusted ampacity of the 12 AWG-THHN conductor is 30 amps times 0.80, which equals 24 amps. Since the ambient temperature is 40 degrees Celsius, which is less than the insulation temperature rating of 90 degrees Celsius, we do not need to apply an ampacity correction factor. Therefore, the final adjusted ampacity of the 12 AWG-THHN conductor is 24 amps. It's important to note that the NEC provides specific requirements for conductor ampacity calculations in different situations. These requirements can vary depending on the type of wiring method, the type of occupancy, and the presence of other equipment or conditions that may affect the conductor's temperature. Therefore, it's always recommended to consult the NEC and other relevant standards to ensure that conductor ampacity calculations are performed correctly and that the wiring system is safe and compliant. When dealing with bundled cables, particularly non-metallic sheathed cables passing through insulated wood framing, the NEC provides additional guidance in Section 334.80. This section addresses the potential for heat build-up in these installations and the need for appropriate ampacity adjustment. Section 334.80 emphasizes that the ampacity of non-metallic sheathed cables must be determined in accordance with 310.15. This means that both ampacity adjustment factors for the number of conductors and ampacity correction factors for ambient temperature must be considered. Furthermore, Section 334.80 specifically addresses the issue of thermal insulation or sealing foam used in wood framing. When non-metallic sheathed cables are installed in wood framing that is insulated or sealed, the insulation can trap heat and further increase the temperature of the conductors. This can lead to a reduction in ampacity and potentially overload the conductors. To mitigate this risk, Section 334.80 requires that the allowable ampacity of the conductors be adjusted in accordance with Table 310.15. B2. When the following conditions are met. Firstly, more than 2 non-metallic sheath cables containing 2 or more current carrying conductors are bundled together. Secondly, the cables pass through wood framing that is to be fire or draft stopped using thermal insulation or sealing foam. When these conditions are met, the ampacity of each conductor must be adjusted according to Table 310.15. B2. This ensures that the conductors are not overloaded and that the wiring system remains safe. Let's revisit our earlier example of bundling 314/2 cables and 114/3 cable, resulting in 9 current-carrying 14 AWG-THHN conductors. We calculated the adjusted ampacity to be 17.5 amps. This adjusted ampacity is less than the ampacity of a 14 AWG conductor with a 60 degrees Celsius insulation rating, which is typically 20 amps. Therefore, the requirement of not exceeding the 60 degrees Celsius rating is satisfied. The purpose of this requirement is to ensure that the conductors are not operated at temperatures that exceed their insulation rating. Operating conductors at excessive temperatures can lead to insulation breakdown, reduced conductor lifespan, and potential fire hazards. The NEC provides ampacity tables, such as Table 310.16, which lists the allowable ampacities of conductors based on their insulation type and temperature rating. These tables are based on specific conditions, such as the number of conductors in a raceway, the ambient temperature, and a conductor's installation method. When these conditions change, the ampacity of the conductors must be adjusted accordingly. It's important to note that the NEC is a comprehensive document that provides detailed requirements for electrical installations. It's essential to consult the NEC and other relevant standards to ensure that all electrical work is performed safely and in compliance with applicable codes. In summary, conductor ampacity adjustments are a critical aspect of electrical wiring. By understanding the NEC requirements and applying the appropriate adjustment and correction factors, you can ensure that your wiring system is safe, reliable, and compliant with applicable codes. Remember to consider the number of current carrying conductors, the ambient temperature, the type of wiring method, and the presence of thermal insulation or sealing foam when determining the ampacity of conductors.